The highway stretched out like a ribbon of cold gray steel under a bruised sky, endless and unforgiving. A restless wind tangled the dry leaves along the cracked shoulder, carrying with it a faint scent of gasoline and old asphalt. It was a kind of afternoon where the clouds threatened rain, but never quite let go, an uneasy pause, hanging heavy and unresolved. Before we begin this journey, if you believe in second chances, quiet miracles, and the unexpected ways life can rewrite our stories, consider subscribing. Because here, we tell stories that linger long after the last word. Stories that echo in the quiet spaces of your heart. Now, let's dive in. Michael Hayes pulled his battered pickup off the road, the tires crunching on gravel as he slowed to a stop near a narrow bend where the trees crowded close. The engine's hum died to silence, leaving only the distant drone of passing cars and the soft whisper wind through rusted guardrails. His eyes caught a flicker of movement by the roadside, something small, fragile, and trembling. He didn't know why he stopped. Maybe it was a kind of instinct that kicks in when life forces your hands to steady themselves. Maybe it was the ghost of his own son, long gone now, tugging him back from numbness. But he climbed out and walked toward the edge of the road, the soles of his boots crunching through brittle leaves. There, shivering and stained with dust and tears, was a boy no older than 7. His clothes were threadbare, coat torn and hung heavy with grime. He stood frozen, eyes wide and glassy, staring into the distance like the weight of the world had settled on his small shoulders. Michael's heart clenched. Before we go any further, if you believe in the power of kindness and the ripples it sends through our lives, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because this story will take you on a ride through loss, hope, and the fragile threads that bind us. The boy didn't say a word, but the tremble in his hands spoke volumes. Michael reached out slowly, his voice low and steady, a tether thrown across the silence. The boy took a hesitant step forward, and with that, a fragile trust began to weave between two strangers bound by invisible scars. Michael wrapped his coat tighter around the boy and carried him to the truck, the boy's fingers gripping the worn seatbelt like a lifeline. The warmth of the cab was unfamiliar but welcome, and as the engine roared back to life, Michael's mind raced, not with solutions, but with questions. Who was this child? Where had he come from? And why was he left alone on the side of a highway that swallowed so many dreams whole? That night, the small apartment Michael called home was thick with silence, broken only by the soft breathing of the boy curled on the couch. The flickering television cast pale blue shadows across the peeling wallpaper and the faded photographs that lined the mantel, a collage of memories from a life once full, now fragmented. Michael moved quietly, careful not to disturb the fragile peace. He brewed coffee strong enough to cut through his exhaustion, the bitter steam rising like a prayer in the dim kitchen light. On the counter sat a small chipped mug, the last gift from his late wife, a reminder that some love never truly fades. As he sipped, he studied the boy. There was something about him, a stillness beneath the tremor, like the calm at the eye of a storm. His dark hair fell in soft waves, framing a face both innocent and wise beyond years. A locket hung around the boy's neck, dull and scratched, but the clasp gleamed with the faintest hint of something precious hidden within. Michael's fingers itched to open it, but he hesitated. Some doors, he knew, only open when you're ready to face what's inside. Days passed like drifting leaves caught in a slow current. The boy, whom Michael named Eli, adapted with a quiet resilience that surprised him. They settled into a rhythm, meals shared over chipped plates, whispered stories in the fading light, and long walks where Eli's small hand found safety in Michael's rough palm. But beneath the calm, shadows stirred. The past has a way of reaching through cracks when you least expect it. One afternoon, a man in a tailored suit stepped into Michael's world, a stranger with sharp eyes and a voice smooth as polished stone. He carried a folder thick with documents and a name that echoed through whispered rumors and missing persons files: Alexander Blackwood. Eli's real name, the son of a billionaire, vanished without a trace years ago. Michael's hands trembled as the truth unfolded. Eli wasn't just a lost boy. He was the center of a storm that had swallowed families, money, and power whole. The man spoke of investigations, custody battles, and a dark web of secrets that clawed at the edges of the city's polished veneer. But in the quiet apartment, in a way Eli looked up at Michael with trust unspoken but deeply felt, none of that mattered yet. What mattered was this. A single dad who had saved a boy from the highway had no idea he'd just saved the son of a missing billionaire, and that the world waiting outside was darker and more dangerous than either of them could imagine. The phone rang in the dead of night, slicing through the stillness like a blade. Michael answered to a voice thick with warning and urgency. Shadowy figures watching, whispers of threats, and a race against time. The past was closing in, and the fragile sanctuary they'd built was at risk. Eli clutched the locket, his eyes wide in the moonlight. Michael swore silently to protect his boy, to shield him from the shadows that had haunted his own life for so long. And as the storm gathered outside, the two of them braced for the fight ahead, one that would test the limits of courage, trust, and the true meaning of family. If this story has touched you so far, if you believe in the power of hope and the unexpected ways lives intersect, share where you're watching from in the comments. Whether a quiet town or a bustling city, your presence here matters. And don't forget to subscribe. The night was thick with the weight of coming storms, both outside and within. Michael sat by the window, the soft glow of streetlights casting long shadows across his worn living room floor. Eli's breathing was steady in the next room, a fragile rhythm that anchored Michael's fractured heart. The world outside felt both distant and dangerously close. Every whisper in the wind carried the echo of that man's words, the sharp edges of Alexander Blackwood's revelations, the looming threat of those unseen forces moving in the shadows. Michael's hands curled around a faded photograph on the mantel, a picture of his own son, smiling wide and free before the accident. Loss, he thought bitterly, had a way of carving hollow spaces in even the strongest souls. But now there was Eli, a boy who carried his own storms, and who looked at Michael with eyes full of trust that dared to believe in something better. The next morning was brittle with cold sunlight, pale and hesitant as it spilled over the rooftops. Michael made breakfast with mechanical motions, the sizzle of eggs in the pan punctuating the silence like a heartbeat. Eli watched on the table, hands wrapped around a chipped mug of cocoa, his gaze distant but curious. Michael wanted to reach across the table and bridge the gulf between fear and hope, but the words tangled somewhere in his throat. Instead, he cleared his throat and said, "We're going to need to get you to a doctor today, just for a checkup." Eli nodded, but his fingers tightened on the mug, betraying the calm. Outside, the city moved like a living beast. Traffic humming, voices mingling, and the distant wail of sirens threading through the morning air. Michael drove with cautious purpose, eyes flickering to Eli in the passenger seat, who stared out the window as if searching for a place where broken things could mend. At the clinic, the sterile smell of antiseptic mixed with the faint hum of hushed conversations. The nurse's smile was kind but practiced, and Eli's small hand slipped into Michael's as if it needed a lifeline. The doctor's questions were clinical but gentle, probing wounds unseen, scars beneath skin, the tremor of anxiety that no medicine could fix. Tests were ordered, forms signed. In the waiting room, time folded in on itself, a stretch of minutes heavy with unspoken fears. Back in the car, the silence between them was thick, a fragile bridge of shared vulnerability. Michael glanced at Eli, noticing for the first time how his lips quivered when he thought no one was watching. Without words, he reached over, brushing a stray lock of hair from Eli's forehead. The gesture was small, but it carried a promise. You're not alone. The days that followed unfolded in a rhythm both exhausting and tender. Michael juggled night shifts at the diner with quiet evenings filled with homework help and whispered stories of superheroes and spaceships, tales Eli invented to fill the empty spaces of his past. One evening, as snow began to dust the city's sidewalks, Eli pulled a worn notebook from his backpack, a secret world of sketches and scribbles. The drawings were a mosaic of hope and pain. A boy holding a bright star, a castle built from cardboard, a locket glowing with impossible light. Michael traced the lines with finger, seeing not just the art but the unspoken stories etched in every stroke. "This," Eli whispered, "is my story." And Michael realized then that healing wasn't just about fixing broken bodies. It was about mending fractured souls, stitch by delicate stitch. But the shadows weren't done. One night, the phone rang with a silence that screamed warning. Michael answered to a voice clipped and cold, a government agent with questions too precise to be coincidence. They wanted records, backgrounds, proof of custody. paperwork that Michael couldn't have, and that Eli's past wasn't ready to reveal. The weight of the unknown pressed in, a silent storm gathering beyond the fragile safety of their walls. Then came the break-in. Michael woke to the sound of glass shattering, the sharp cracks splitting the night. Heart pounding, he found the front door ajar, the apartment ransacked with careless violence. Drawers emptied, paper scattered like fallen leaves, Eli nowhere in sight. Panic surged through Michael like wildfire. The quiet boy who had taught him the hope was gone, swallowed by a world that seemed determined to keep secrets buried. He called the police, but even their reassurances felt hollow. The investigation moved slowly, tangled in red tape and unanswered questions. Days blurred into restless nights. Michael searched every corner of the city, following shadows and whispers, holding tight to the fragile thread of Eli's laughter in his memory. Until a lead came, a phone call from a woman with a voice as soft as rain, but edged with steel. She claimed to know where Eli was, and that the truth about the boy's past was darker and more tangled than anyone had imagined. Michael drove through the night, city lights fading behind him, replaced by endless stretches of highway under a starless sky. His mind raced with the fragments of what he'd learned. Whispered threats from powerful men, ties to a billionaire father lost to a scandal that had shattered headlines years ago. Eli wasn't just lost. He was a prize in a game where trust was currency and betrayal the only guarantee. When he reached the outskirts of Forgotten Town, the air was thick with cold and silence. A lone cabin stood against the wind, its windows dark and unwelcoming. Michael approached cautiously, heart pounding with a mix of fear and hope. Inside, he found Eli, safe but guarded, and waiting was a woman from the call, her eyes sharp and secrets sharper. She spoke of a choice: disappear and be free, or stay and face the storm that came with being the son of a missing billionaire. Michael looked at Eli, the boy who had survived the highway, who had rewritten a broken man's future with quiet resilience. He realized then that family wasn't just about blood or wealth. It was about the choices made in the face of fear, the courage to stand when the world demanded you fall. The storm outside howled like a living thing, rattling the windows and tearing at the edges of the fragile sanctuary they had built. Michael took Eli's hand, steady and sure. "We face this together," he said, voice low but fierce. And as the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, the two of them stepped into the light, uncertain, unbroken, and ready to write the next chapter. If this story touched you, if it made you believe in the power of second chances and the quiet miracles that happen when we refuse to give up, drop a comment below to share where you're watching from, because your voice is part of this story too. And make sure you subscribe, because this journey isn't over. There are more stories waiting in the shadows, and together we'll shine a light on them all.